In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create both art and pattern brushes. Alright, so in the previous lesson we walked through Illustrator's brush panel and we talked about 3 out of the 5 different types of brushes and walked a little bit through their settings. We didn't actually create brushes, but I showed you how to create those. Now, we left out the art brush and the pattern brush, and in this lesson we're going to walk through creating a couple of those brushes. These are a couple of the tougher brushes to grasp, and I want to just walk you through and actually create a couple of these brushes. So let's go ahead and start with the art brush. If you remember, we have a few different art brushes already listed here in the brush panel. Now, this is actually a bristle brush, but let's come over here to our scratch area and take a look at what we've got. We've got a few graphics here. Now remember, we're working on a stationary package here, and maybe we want to do a little landscape down here at the bottom of this letterhead, and maybe we want to add some trees. So I've got a couple trees here. Let me go ahead and grab maybe this tree right here. And you know what? There is a couple different ways that we can create an art brush here. Now, we already talked about the new brush button and the option under the brush panel options here to create a brush. We can also actually just drag this artwork into the brush panel here. Now, it gives us some options. We can create a scatter brush, an art brush, or a pattern brush with this artwork. We're going to choose art brush right now. And let's check out this dialog. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give my brush a name. Let's just call this Tree Brush 1. And if we look down this dialog, you see here that there's a width option here. Right now it's at 100%. And I'm looking here at my tree behind this dialog, and that's about the right size. You know, this is going to increase the width based on the initial size of that artwork. So we can actually change the width of that based on a few different options here, like pressure and stylus wheel and so on. Similar options to what we saw in the last lesson. We have some different scaling options here, though. We can actually scale this tree proportionally for longer paths, so it's going to create a massive tree. I don't want to do that. We don't need the tree moving up into the area where there's going to be type. We can actually stretch this to fit the stroke length, and that's going to actually deform this tree quite a bit. I want to figure out a way to stretch this tree and make it look like different trees, maybe different heights. Let me go ahead and choose this stretch between guides option here. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and you notice here there's a couple dashed lines that appear on top of our artwork. We can just drag those down here, and maybe I just want to stretch the trunk portion. So I'm just going to drag that up, maybe not the roots, maybe just this portion in between the dashed lines. So let's go ahead and use that here. We've got some directional buttons here for our tree. Now right now it's moving in a downward fashion, and you can see that based on this little blue arrow that goes through the tree. Now we could change that and reverse that to move up, or we could draw this tree in from the side. You know, I'm going to leave this as it currently was. I think that's going to do just fine. This option will probably draw our tree upside down, and we don't want it to be on its side either direction. So let's go ahead and just check these other flipping options out. The flip along and the flip across relate to flipping the tree around the path that it's sitting on. And then of course we have some colorization options here based on tints and strokes, or excuse me, tints and shades, and then hue shifts. And that's similar to what we looked at in the previous lesson. They're based on a key color, and you can see that key color here. We can actually change that with the eyedropper tool. Now the little light bulb here is going to give us some tips for using this dialog, just so you'll know. And you know, in previous versions of Illustrator, art brushes had a lot of problems when they encountered corners. A lot of times the artwork that was created as the brush would fold on top of itself around corners. Well, now in CS5, Illustrator actually has an option to ignore corners or to modify the artwork to fit around the corner. So Illustrator is trying to make some changes as far as handling corners better with its art brushes. So let's go ahead and just hit OK on this dialog here. You can see that we have a new art brush that's been created over in the brush panel here. So let's go ahead and just maybe pull in some paths. Let's go ahead and grab our line segment tool here, and let's go ahead and maybe, we don't need a fill on this, so let's go ahead and let's just draw in some vertical paths here. We'll just draw one in there and maybe over here. And let me just go ahead and hold Shift and Control and select both of those paths. And I'm going to come over here and click on the new brush that I just created here. So let's click that. And let's go ahead and just zoom in here and deselect those. Alright, so this tree looks fairly normal. This one looks kind of short, kind of squatty. Maybe we got the path just a little bit too small here for this tree. So let's go ahead and maybe we stretch this one out and make it a bigger tree. Well, we actually don't want to do that. I actually proportionally scaled the tree. Let me just undo that here. Alright, so let's go ahead and maybe just grab our direct selection arrow, and let's modify this path by grabbing one of these anchor points and just moving that anchor point up higher. So we've drawn essentially a longer path. And you can see here how the tree is stretching along that path. It's only stretching in that area we specified between the guides. So that's a pretty handy trick for creating one graphic that can be used multiple times and appear to be different vector objects. Now let's go ahead and talk about another type of brush here. Let's talk about the pattern brush. We've looked at this example right here now. Let's take a look in the brush panel at the brush being used here. Let's just double click on this and look at the pattern brush options. Now the pattern brush uses a series of up to 5 tiles to create a pattern around a path. Now you can see that this particular pattern brush is only using 2 of those tiles. Now let's go ahead and back out of this dialog. We're going to go over these options in just a moment, but let's go ahead and talk about how we get those tiles. Now we have some artwork here that we're going to create those tiles out of, but in order to do that we need to make this artwork into a swatch. So I tell you what, let's come up to our swatch panel here, and I know we haven't actually gone through the swatch panel and talked about its options yet, but let me just show you how you can create a swatch out of this artwork really fast. We can actually take each one of these tiles and just drag it over and drop it into our swatch panel. Pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and make a swatch for each one of these pieces of artwork that we're going to use for a tile. So we've got all 5 of those right there in the swatch panel. That's where we want them. And let's go ahead and come in here and let's go ahead and create a new pattern brush. We're going to come in, and we don't need artwork selected for this particular brush, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit the new brush option here and select pattern brush. And let's go ahead and just call this geometric. Now we have a scaling option with a slider. Right now we're at 100%, and you know those tiles were actually pretty large when I created them, so let's go ahead and reduce that in size. Maybe we drop that down to about 60%. And again, we can vary the scale based on the same options as we had in the previous dialog: pressure, stylus wheel, so on and so forth. We also have a spacing option here. Increasing this spacing option is actually going to add space in between our tiles, and you know I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and jump down here to the tiles. Now there are 5 different tiles that we've talked about, and each one of these serves a different purpose on a path, and we're going to talk about each one. This first tile is going to be our side tile, and you can see that represented in the little graphic right here. The side tile in this existing pattern brush behind this dialog is going to be these horizontal lines right here, the tile that creates those. So the next tile over is going to be our outer corner tile. On this particular rectangle, it's going to be this tile right here. Now remember, that one only used 2 tiles, so this next tile right here, this is an inner corner tile. Now this one's a little confusing, so we'll make sure and show you exactly what this one looks like. To the right of that we have both a start tile and an end tile for our path. Now let's go ahead and assign some tiles to those. Now we've got our tiles that we've created down here. We didn't give those swatches names, so they just have sort of a default name here as they came in. Let's look for our side tile. I intended for that tile to be this one right here. And grabbing our outer corner tile, there it is. Let's go ahead and grab this one for the inner corner tile, and let's go ahead and grab the blue diamond for the start and the orange diamond, the orange diamond for the end here. So we'll go ahead and do that. We've got another option here to flip this pattern brush along our path, either along it or across it. Then we have some stretching options. Now right now, I'm just going to leave this set to stretch to fit, but we'll come back into these options and take a look at what each one of these does after we get this brush applied to some paths. So again, the same colorization options as before, tints and shades, and hue shifts. So let's go ahead and hit OK here. And I'm going to come over to our artboard, and let's just grab our rectangle tool, and let's go ahead and just draw in a path here. I'm going to go ahead and draw in a rectangle shape, just like so. Let's go ahead and get rid of that fill, and let's get rid of that stroke here. I'm going to go ahead and grab my pen tool. I'm going to draw one more path here, and this is going to be an open path, and I'm just going to draw something like this just to demonstrate this pattern brush a little differently to you. So let's come over here and grab our rectangle first, and let's just apply our new brush stroke to that path. All right, so we'll zoom in here, and you can see here that, again, we're only using 2 of the tiles, even though we specified 5. That's because not all of the different options are available to us here. This is a closed path, so we don't have a start and an end to it, and these are all outer corners, being that they face the outside of the path. So I tell you what, let's come in and look at the options for this brush again, and look at those options we had for fitting. So we stretch these tiles to fit right now. We're actually modifying these tiles, stretching them to fit as closely as possible, so this is a seamless pattern here. Now, right now, because of the stretching of tiles, we've got some distortion here. This tile right here isn't fully represented. It looks like it's back behind this corner some, so be aware that distorting your tiles may not always be the best option depending on the pattern you're creating. We can actually add space between our tiles to make them fit as neatly as possible, but that's actually going to just leave a little gap here. I wanted this to be sort of a seamless transition on the sides, so let's take a look at the approximate path and see what that does. Alright, now there was some definite changes here. It appears that our pattern has been flipped across our path, but actually what is happening here with the approximate path option is that Illustrator is trying to fit this pattern brush as closely as possible as it can to our initial path without distorting or transforming the tiles in any way. So in this case, it inverted it across the path, but take a look here at what it does. It actually moves it out a little beyond the path as well. Usually this pattern is going to sit dead center on our path, but if we move that back in, it's actually moving it out and away from the path just a little bit. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and just switch that back to stretch to fit for right now and hit OK. And let's go ahead and apply the same brush to our open path over here. I'll go ahead and just do that here now. And we'll move this one to the side so we can zoom in and take a look here. Now, again, with this path, it's open, so we have all of our tiles represented. We have our little diamonds here at the beginning, at the end of our path. We have our outer corners, being that they face the outside of the path. And we also have our inner corners, being that they face the inside of the path. So you can see here exactly what each one of these different tiles is for, based on this open path here. Now, we could actually go ahead and make this into sort of a plus sign, filling this out, adding additional path segments to this, and closing this shape, and it would still use actually it would use 3 of the different tiles. We wouldn't use our little diamonds for the beginning and the end because it's a closed path, but we would still get these inner corner tiles and use them on the shape. So you can really see how the pattern brush can be sort of a confusing brush, but let me just encourage you with this. The more times you use the pattern brush and create different patterns, the more accustomed you're going to get to using this tool. Now, I'd like to encourage you, between lessons, go ahead and try and create a couple of these 2 different brushes yourself. When you come back, we're going to talk about a different kind of brush called the blob brush.